So, in the last class, I had explained to you what is written communication and what are the three elements of written communication. So, the three elements of written communication are structure, style, and content. What is the structure? The clarity of your thoughts and the purpose of your communication before you start writing will definitely help you to give a good structure to your writing. Then you need to identify the key points. Then you need to decide the order of writing. You have to be systematic so that the reader can understand the true purpose of the letter or the message. Then, regarding the composition, you need to compose a strong introduction as well as a conclusion. So, there should be three parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. So, you have to take care of all these three parts, and mainly your introduction and the conclusion should be strong. Next, you must use short paragraphs and short sentences when you write. Do not write, you know, very long sentences and very long paragraphs, because uh, in that way you make a lot of mistake, and also the reader might not understand what you're actually trying to say. So you can also do one another thing to help the key points to stand out is by using headings, subheadings, and bullet points. You can use headings, subheadings, you can use the key points as headings, subheadings, and bullet points, and this is going to let the reader quickly understand your message. Next, the style. It should look neat, elegant, neat and clean. And if you're sending a handwritten note, then it should be also in good handwriting. It should be, it should not be long. It should be concise. That means it should be informative, but you must not use too many words. You must use less words, but it must also provide whatever information you. It must be informative. It must provide whatever information you want to provide, but it should not be that long as well. It should not be like a book. So you must make your paragraphs short. Do not make your paragraphs like which consist of more than 10 lines. So your paragraph should be of less than 10 lines. Read it and try to make your paragraphs within 10 lines. Then, regarding the sentences, again, one idea should be used for one sentence. Then, you need to avoid unnecessary things, you need to avoid unnecessary short forms. You're not supposed to write it in short, you're supposed to use full forms. And also, you have to research a little bit about the audience. So, whom to whom you're writing, that matters a lot. So it depends upon the reader, okay, whether the reader will like whatever you have written, or whether the reader is not going to find it interesting or worthy. So according to the reader, you have to select the style of writing. So these are the few things that you need to maintain. And the last element is the content. So you have to check all the spellings. You have to write it properly. You have to use proper punctuations. You cannot be grammatically incorrect. And again, you have to first of all think in advance what you want to say, what do you want to express, and then you will have to be able to write it clearly. Your objective must be clear, and you must make sure that you have listed the essential points. And you must also check whether whatever you have written, whatever the points you have mentioned, are clear enough or not. So these are the few things regarding the content that you have to maintain. Okay, now I'm going to explain you written communication is effective, when written communication is effective. All right, so sometimes written communication is effective and sometimes written communication is ineffective. Sometimes you can use written communication and sometimes you cannot use. So there are certain advantages and there are certain disadvantages of written communication. So first of all, I'm going to explain you when you can use written communication. All right, conveying complex information. So when you want to convey some kind of complex information, you can use written communication rather than oral communication. Why? Because you can keep it documented. Okay, and the reader can read it again and again. Suppose I want to share some kind of information with you all, and I feel that if I just say it, if I convey my thoughts with you all orally, then you might not understand it or you might forget it. So then what mode will I use? Which medium will I use? I'll be using the written mode, isn't it? So, in that case, what you can do is you can read it again and again to understand it, isn't it? And you can also remember it. So, when you have to convey something complex, something that needs to be documented, so in that way, you should definitely write it, because in that way it'll be able to keep it as a document, and reader, the receiver, can also read it repeatedly and try to understand the entire message. Next is need for permanent record. So when you need a permanent record, so oral communication will not help you to keep any kind of permanent record. So in that case, you definitely have to write and communicate if you want to keep a record. Later on you might need it, isn't it? So later on you might need that record, you have to maybe show that record to someone. So in that case you have to write and communicate. So written communication is preferred if you need to keep a permanent record, because in case of oral communication, people forget, isn't it? People forget, and if you are the one who has shared the message, who has provided the information orally, you might also later on forget what were the points that you have mentioned. You might also later on forget the entire thing or maybe half of the thing. So that is why for permanent records, to maintain permanent records, written communication is the best way of communicating. The third point is communicating with large audience. So whenever you want to reach a audience, when you want to reach a lot of people at the same time, and you cannot go to everyone and share the information or share the message or share the idea with each and every individual, then what you can do is you can use the written mode. Now you all have WhatsApp groups, isn't it? We have official groups, you all have your personal groups, isn't it? So what is the purpose of a group on WhatsApp? What is the purpose? Its purpose is to communicate with a lot of people at the same time. Now, if I have to message you all individually, 101 students, if I have to message you individually, it will take a lot of time, isn't it? But if I choose to share the information with you all at the same time, what will I have to do? I will have to create a group and I will have to share the message there. So in that case, written communication is very helpful, because for communicating orally, you have to call each and every individual. If you're conducting a seminar, if you're conducting a meeting, so you cannot just call all the people every now and then, isn't it? So I cannot call you up every now and then, isn't it? I cannot, like, uh, call you or do a video conference with you all every now and then, isn't it? When I have to share some information, what will I do? I'll just write and drop it in the group, so that you all, every one of you, get my message, isn't it? So that is why when we want to communicate with large audience, when we want to interact with a lot of people at the same time, we can use the written mode of communication. Next is less need for interaction with audience. So everything is interrelated. You have to see that, you have to understand that all the points are interrelated. Okay, when you need to interact with the audience for only some time, you do not have to uh, conduct a meeting or a seminar for that. You can just use the written mode of communication. In that case, when you do not think that you need to conduct a meeting or you need to conduct a seminar for 1 hour, so in that case, if you want to just share some information, you can just write and communicate in order to immediately share the information or share the message. All right, so in that case, when suppose I want to share a message with you all, I want to immediately share the information with you all, what will I do? I will just drop a message, I will write it to you all, isn't it? Because it's not possible for me to call everyone, isn't it, to make a call. So that is why I will use the written mode of communication. So when you do not need to interact, when you do not need to interact for a longer duration, when there's no requirement of interaction which lasts for a longer duration, then you can just use the written mode of communication. You uh, l- less need for interaction with audience, and the audience, there's a large number of audience, there are a lot of people. Okay, in that case, if there's only one person, that you can definitely make a call. But if there's a lot of people, but you need to share the information, but you can just you do not have to, like, you do not need 1 hour to explain about that. So what you can do is just write and communicate. Next is maintaining uniformity of application. Now, this is also another very important part of written communication. Why? When people should communicate uh, using the written mode, when people should actually write and communicate. To maintain uniformity, when you want to share the same message with everyone, when you want to tell the same thing to everyone, to maintain the uniformity, you can write and communicate. It's better you write and communicate. Why? Because if you communicate orally, the message will keep on changing. By the time you reach the 10th person, your message will totally change. So that is why, if you want to use the same words, and if you want to convey the same message, if you want to share the same information with everyone, to maintain uniformity, you can write and communicate instead of orally communicating with everyone. Now, this is helpful especially when the sender and the receiver and the receivers are at different places. So, in that case, you can just write and communicate to share the same information, because in case of oral communication, what do? In case of oral communication, the message, it keeps on changing. The words keeps on changing. So that is why when you want to share the same information with everyone, you can use the written mode of communication. Okay, so these are some of the points when you should write and communicate. All right, so these are the situations when you need to write and communicate, and these are the situation where written communication is more effective than oral communication. Is there any doubt? Have you understood? Have you understood? I want your response. Is there any doubt regarding when to use written communication, when to write
No,
and
ma'am.
communicate? I want to see all your answers in the chat box, whether you have understood or not. Is there anyone who has not understood something? Okay, as you have understood, so I will move ahead. When not to use written communication. Now, I'll be explaining you when you're not supposed to use written communication. So, in these particular situation, you are not supposed to use the written mode of communication. In crisis, so in crisis, you cannot just wait for the other person, for the receiver to read and understand the message, because you need to quickly share the information, you need to quickly send the message. So, in crisis, you cannot use written communication, because written communication, it takes a little bit of time, whereas oral communication is quick compared to written communication, whereas written communication is a bit slower than oral communication, because once you share the information, the other person will take some time to check the message, to read it and understand it, and the other person might also have some kind of doubts. In written communication, uh, misunderstandings occur very quickly, whereas in oral communication, you can tackle this kind of situations, you can handle this kind of situations, because you're communicating with the other person orally. So in case you have any doubt, you can clear it, you can ask the other person. But in case of written communication, it takes a little bit of time to understand, to read, to understand everything, and to clear the doubts. So, in the time of crisis, you cannot use written communication to share any information, any message. So, you have to choose oral communication. Next is when a personal discussion is good enough. Sometimes it's not necessary to write and communicate. Sometimes a personal discussion is enough. If there is some problem, if uh, there's some issue going on, sometimes a personal discussion is enough to sort out the problem, to resolve the conflict, to a simple conversation is going to help you to understand one another, whereas written communication might create some misunderstanding. So, all the time, you do not have to write and communicate. Sometimes a personal discussion is also enough. So, you have to figure out where you have to keep the records and where It's not necessary to keep any record. If you're not communicating with a large audience in different places, and if you are not supposed to keep it documented, or if you do not need any kind of record, so then you can just go and have a conversation with the other person. So in that case, written communication is not necessary. To brainstorm, seek clarification, generate ideas. So to generate ideas, to have a detailed discussion, okay, to seek ideas, to understand one another, okay. In that case, written communication is not going to work. You have to go for oral communication, because you won't be able to brainstorm using the written mode. You won't be able to discuss or produce any ideas or solve any kind of problems using the written mode. So when you want to generate ideas or produce ideas, when you want to produce ways of solving any kind of problem, a spontaneous discussion, a spontaneous group discussion, that means brainstorming session, is very necessary. Where so in that kind of a situation, a person can definitely provide the other people, the people in the group can definitely provide a lot of ideas, a lot of solutions. So when you are in that situation where you are unable to think of some ideas and you need help, you cannot just write and brainstorm. You cannot just try to write and produce ideas. You cannot just try to write and seek ideas. So you have to call the people. You have to discuss. You need to have a group discussion. So written communication is not going to work in this kind of a situation. The next point is for conflict resolution. When you want to solve a conflict, when you want to find out a solution for of a problem, you cannot write and communicate. You cannot use the written mode of communication to find out a solution. You have to face the other person and you have to have a conversation with the other person, because the way you will be able to express your opinion, your feelings personally, you won't be able to do that with the help of a pen and a paper. You won't be able to do that. You won't be able to pour all your feelings in a into a paper. All right. So in that case, when you have to solve a problem, when you have to find out a solution, when you have to resolve a conflict, you need to have a direct conversation with the other person. The next point is in cross cultural settings, as words have different meanings in different settings. So sometimes in cross cultural settings, that means when I am from a different culture and when you are from a different culture and we are communicating with one another. So sometimes written communication might not work, sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not work. Why it might not work? Because the same word might have different meaning in your culture and in my culture. So misunderstanding. So if you write and communicate, you will develop some kind of misunderstandings, isn't it? So in that case, it's better to have a personal communication. It's better to have a oral communication. It's better to have a conversation with one another orally rather than writing and communicating with one another. Even if like when you have a conversation orally, when you communicate orally, then even if the meanings have even if the words that you and I are using are misunderstood, you can uh, you can clear your doubts instantly. In that in that very moment you can instantly clear all your doubts, but in case of written mode, that is a little difficult. All right, so these are some of the situations when you're not supposed to use the written mode of communication. Have you understood? Is there any doubt regarding the points?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
All right, then I'll be providing you the notes. I will be sharing this file with you all in the WhatsApp group. Now you will see another heading, Shades of Meaning. Okay, now you have to read this yourself. Okay, you have to read this yourself, and once you read it, you will be able to understand it. Okay, after that, if you have some kind of doubt, come to me. I will definitely explain you. All right, so that is why, first of all, you have to read it. There are few words which are which look similar, which sound similar, but the words have different meaning. Okay, the words are given, the meanings are given. Okay, what you have to do is you have to just read it so that you can understand the difference between the words which sound which seem similar. So the first example, the first two words are customer and client. Now, these two words are quite similar, isn't it? These two words are something that seems quite similar, but they have different meanings. Okay? So, here it is given, a customer is someone who buys goods and services. So, in a shop, when you go to buy something, then you are the customer. Who is a client? A client receives professional services. So, if you are a lawyer and if a person comes to you and seek helps regarding law and order, then that person is not your customer. That person is your client. So these words are something that seems similar, that sounds similar, but have different meanings and must be used in different situations. Okay, so you have to read all the words and understand the meanings. That's it. If you do not understand something, then you can ask me. There's nothing to explain about, there's nothing to explain regarding these words. The words are given and the meanings of the words are also given. Just read it and try to understand it. If after reading it, if you have any kind of doubt, then you can ask me. Okay, so that's all for today. I hope all of you have understood. So I want to know, is there any kind of doubt